Comfort reads. What are your favorite books and why do you continue to read them over and over again? For me, that's easy. One of my two favorite books is called Friday's Child by Georgette Heyer. And I first found this book in high school. And this goes back to my high school had a lot of older books, not really keeping up with the current trends of the time. I grew up in a agricultural community in the Central California Valley, and it wasn't a big city where probably some of the schools may have gotten the latest and greatest books that were available, but my library had a lot of older books, and I'm not sorry about that because I found a lot of books that I would not have otherwise read and books that I'm sure I would continue to enjoy if I could remember what they were so I could revisit them. But Friday's Child in particular really stuck with me. This is one of two of my favorite Georgette Heyer books. The other one would be Arabella. And if anyone is a fan of Georgette Heyer, you know that she is a Regency romance author. She was writing in the first half of the 20th century. So this book, the let's see here, the publication date of this issue was 1971. So actually, for my high school, this was a pretty recent acquisition because I was in high school in toward the later part of the 1970s. It originally came out in 1946, and Regency romance. So obviously, the romance was just the couple getting to know each other, and there were all kinds of shenanigans happening. It took place during the early part of the 19th century, if I'm not mistaken. I think it would have been the early 1800s would have been the Regency period. And the Regency period relates specifically to England, and there was a prince regent at the time. So that was the background. I love the historic elements of the story. Anything that took me out of my environment and showed me another place and another time was something that I really enjoyed, which is why I absolutely adored Friday's Child. The other thing I loved about this book was that um, the heroine, the main female character, she is very young. I believe, if I remember correctly, I haven't reread this for a while, and it's coming up very soon for another reread. But she was about 17 at the time. She was living with relatives. Her parents were no longer living, and she had been taking care of other people's children. I think they were her cousins, and she was not really a well schooled young woman. So she also tended to get herself into what they called scrapes, which was she would do something and it would, just spur the moment. She was very spontaneous. And so her more straight laced family, her relatives, weren't appreciative of her moods, and they were going to send her off to become a governess. And she was very upset about this because she was not well schooled and she did not feel that she could adequately take care of children. That was just not her place in life, at least not as a teacher. And she runs away. So she runs into a young man who has just um, proposed to the woman he thought he was in love with. She turned him down because she felt that he wasn't mature enough to get married, and I believe she was right. So he leaves and says that he's going to marry the next woman he finds, and he happens to run across, the main female character whose name is Hero Wantage, and uh, love the name Hero. Apparently, it was a woman's name at that time period. So Hero is sitting on a stone wall, I think, in the countryside, as my Lord Sheringham, who is the main male character, comes by in his carriage. He's heading back to town because he's been slighted, and he's going to go and maybe find the next woman he sees to marry. The next woman he sees happens to be Hero. and he's chatting with her. They've known each other for a long time. They grew up together. He teased her as a child, as kids do. And when he mentions what had just happened, she commiserates with him and says that it's too bad that his potential suitor just did not reciprocate his feelings, and that it was her loss. And then she points out to Lord Sheringham that she is the next woman he sees. Now, as I mentioned, she's 17 and she's rather spontaneous, whereas he's maybe in his mid 20s or so, and he is definitely not mature enough to get married. The woman he had been pursuing was right about that. But he does take Hero up and they elope. Now, in modern times, we would find it problematic that a man in his probably mid 20s has run off with a 17-year-old and married her, because really, even then, it probably would have been problematic. But she had no family, and really, he did not mean any harm by it. He doesn't take advantage of her in a physical sense. And that's another thing I love about Regency romances, is that they're not really getting to know each other in a physical sense. There is very little intimacy, physical intimacy in the book. They're getting to know each other as on an intellectual level, on a personality level, and so they run off and get married, and he goes about his life as though he still were a single man, and he's given her the nickname Kitten, which I absolutely adore. I think that's so cute because he says she looks at him like a kitten with the big eyes, and she's got that kind of air to her that she's constantly getting into trouble even though she doesn't mean it. And I think it's very endearing the way he calls her Kitten. And he has a couple of his friends that he's roped in to be his witnesses, and they are very supportive of him and Kitten. Actually, they become more supportive of Kitten over the course of the story because of the way things play out. So I love the innocence. I love the historical elements. I love the way the couple gets to know each other intimately, but it's more of on a personality level than them just jumping into bed every 2 minutes, which is fine. I have read those kinds of books as well, and I enjoy them. Those are just not my comfort reads. My comfort reads are more related to maybe a simpler time and place, or what I think would be a simpler time and place. And that is one of the reasons I love Georgette Heyer's books so much. Also, she had a way of writing dialogue that was just perfect. I loved her dialogue, and I loved the historic elements that she put into her stories. I love that she actually was very accurate about her historic elements, the background characters that were involved, and the clothing that they would have worn, and going to Almack's in London for the season, and you had to get the patroness's approval to be able to go to Almack's, and the marriage mart and all of that. So if you are watching this and you have read a Regency romance, you understand exactly what I'm talking about, because there is a very particular feeling to that era that I just absolutely love. And there are other historic romances that I've read, but for some reason I'm fixated on the Regency period, and it may be related to reading these Georgette Heyer or Hare books in high school, because like I said, I do tend to revisit them a lot. It has been a few years, so I do need to reread both Friday's Child and Arabella. I have read other of her books and have really enjoyed them as well. The Toll Gate, for example. I think I actually read that one again more recently than Friday's Child, which is a shame because I'm torn. I really can't say, and I think it depends on my mood, whether Friday's Child or Arabella would be my favorite comfort read. I love them both. Arabella is about another young woman named Arabella, who is the oldest daughter in a family of numerous children, and they live in a parsonage. They are not wealthy, and her mother has a friend in London who agrees to sponsor her for the season so she can find a husband to help, with her siblings, because the common practice at the time was if you could marry your daughter well, to someone who had some money. They would help bring out any successive daughters to find husbands, or they might sponsor a son to join the military, and not at a base rank, but they could be maybe a captain or something, be an officer of some type, because you had to buy into a commission in the military. So in Arabella's case, I guess it's her godmother, her mother's friend is her godmother. And her godmother agrees to sponsor her for the season. So Arabella is sent to London, and along the way, her carriage breaks down by the hunting box, which would be a small, um, not really a cabin, but a small house out in the countryside where gentlemen could go and enjoy a sporting season of hunting. So she happens to break down outside of this hunting box. If I remember correctly, it was raining, and she and her companion drag into the hunting box. And meanwhile, there are a couple of gentlemen there. One of them is the man who owns the hunting box. His name is Robert. And um, I don't know if that factored into me marrying somebody named Robert. I joke that my husband is a combination of two characters, Robert Beaumaris from Arabella and Tony Nelson from I Dream of Jeannie, because when my husband proposed to me, I had seen him for the first time wearing his blues, his Air Force blues, and he did remind me a bit of Larry Hagman. Obviously, I know my husband much better now, that to know that he's neither of those characters, because obviously those characters were both kind of a stereotype of a certain gentleman at a certain time period. But got kind of my joke that I married Robert Beaumaris and Tony Nelson. Anyway, that was an aside that didn't mean anything to you, but Robert Beaumaris is a wealthy gentleman, obviously, since he does have a hunting box, and he is a man of fashion. So people actually look at what he's wearing, and he can set trends in London. He's not quite the height of fashion, but he's got an understated fashion that a lot of people appreciate. Aside from the ones who are the veritable tulip fashion. And you can tell that, I've read a few of these Regency romances because I can throw out some of the language in these books. So Robert Beaumaris and his friend are there at the hunting box, and when Arabella comes trudging in from the broken wheel on her carriage, she overhears them because they have been announced. And Mr. Beaumaris says that he believes it's just another female who's out for his fortune. So Arabella, even though she has been well brought up, she actually has a kind of a little bit of a she's not quite as flighty as Hera Wantage in Friday's Child, but she's still a little mischievous. And she pretends that she has money, and she has no interest in this man. That she's on her way to London for the season, and she would appreciate it if they would not bandy about the fact that she is a wealthy woman, because she wants to find a husband on her own merits, and she doesn't want a man who wants her just for her money. And so obviously she has been sent to London because their family has no money, and she's trying to help her sisters find places in life that will, so they'll be comfortable, they'll live comfortably. Now, Mr. Beaumaris, Robert, has decided that he finds this rather amusing because he has an inkling that she's not as wealthy as she says. So he decides he's going to make her all the rage in London because he can do things like that. And the course of the story plays out. She gets to London. Rumors start to circulate that she is wealthy. So all of these men keep asking her to dance with them and to attend balls with them. And she starts to hear that the reason they're asking her out and that she's so popular is because they do think she's wealthy. And she's very upset with herself because now she's set herself up. She doesn't feel like she can marry any of these men because she would be leading them on and not telling them the truth about herself. And that she's going to be letting down her mother and her family in the process. And of course, over the course of events, Arabella and Robert become, friendly with each other, you might say, and she doesn't feel that she should accept his proposal of marriage either if he should choose to do so. He does start to express an interest in her, and she's very upset because she likes him and she really feels like she would like to be with him, but she doesn't feel she can because of all these rumors. Whereas she doesn't understand that he knew all along all about her. And so it's a comedy of errors, you might say, both of the books. I really love, like I said, the dialogue, the historical elements. As you can tell, I remember a lot of the details of the stories because I've reread them so frequently. So those are my main comfort reads. And I think comfort reads are very important for all of us. Excuse me, especially in this world where things can be very difficult and, we need a little bit of escapism. And one of the reasons I think my books maybe not are not as popular as I would hope they would be. Aside from the fact that JT and I are not known, and we haven't had a viral book release or anything like that. So that's not to say our books aren't well written. I hope they are because we work very hard to get them edited properly and get good covers and things like that. But they're not written to market, so to speak. And I think part of the reason for that is because, in my case at least, I am so fond of these older books with a more flowery language and the historic background, and they evoke a very specific time and a place. And that is some of what I'm trying to do with my books, my Restless Spirit series and Battleborn Bride. They're going to have a lot of historic elements in them. They are, I don't know that I would have the skills that Georgette Heyer, I'm sorry, I'm never quite sure how to pronounce it. I keep going back and forth. I call her Georgette Heyer. So for the just the sake of continuing this video, we'll say Georgette Heyer. Um, because I admire her writing so much, I don't know that my dialogue would be as witty as hers. And her dialogue, as I mentioned, this book, Friday's Child, it was released in 1946. So the dialogue is very different from modern dialogue. And I think some of the problems with my book may be that modern readers aren't fond of my more flowery prose. So I I'm torn because I don't feel like I could ever write to market. But I do hope that maybe someday somebody will stumble across one of my books the way I stumbled across Georgette Heyer's books and will read it, and something in it will grab their attention and will comfort them, and that they may go back and reread it. And in the case of this particular version of Friday's Child, there is a story behind this. So JT and I actually went to Canada a couple of years ago. We've been wanting to go to British Columbia, and along the way, we stopped in Portland, Oregon. And one of the things we wanted to do while we were there was visit Powell's City of Books because we'd heard so much about it. So we went to Powell's, which is amazing if you're ever in Portland. Now this is the main branch of Powell's, so it's the block. It's a full block of a bookstore. It's a huge building, and there is a Shake Shack across the street, I believe. I hope it's still there because if we go back to visit, I really enjoyed that Shake Shack. But Powell's has what they call a rare book room, and it was locked off, and you had to get a special pass to wear in there. You had to go through not technically security, but they were trying to keep the room locked down a little bit. And they had books in there that would have been considered very rare, but they also had some not hugely rare books, but not modern, used books that you would just throw on a shelf anywhere. And among these books, I saw this edition of Friday's Child. And I was transported directly back to high school because this is the exact library binding of the first book I read, the first Friday's Child edition, Georgette Heyer, that I read in high school. And obviously I had a very visceral response to seeing this book, and I probably spent way too much money on it because though it is a used book, it is, gosh, what, 55 years old now, this version was released in 1971. So I probably spent too much money on that book, but it is because it was such a comfort read for me, and it was such an important part of my formative reading as a high schooler that I just couldn't pass it up. I had to bring it home with me. So I love this book so much. Oh, I know it's silly, but that's how we feel about some of our comfort things. And I'm talking about this as I'm dressed in sweats, and I'm the thumbnail you may have seen. I'm sitting in my sunroom with my book, and I was going to record down there, but the neighbor kids are playing outside, so it was a little too noisy. They're having a good time, which I enjoy hearing, but you probably don't want the background noise. So also, my laundry is going as well, and sometimes you can hear the spin cycle. I hope you can't hear it from up here because now I'm up on the top floor of the house. Oh, but all of that being said, I'm curious to know, what are your favorite comfort reads? What books do you continue to revisit over and over again because they just make you so happy? Have you had an experience where you came across an edition? Maybe you didn't have it, because obviously the first book I read was from the library, so I didn't have this particular version for myself. I did later get a paperback version that had been a library book that they deaccessioned because the book started falling apart. And I still have it. I have it tied together. I have reread that book so many times. It's missing the last page of the book, but it doesn't matter because I know exactly the dialogue that happens at the very end of the book. And actually, since I mentioned it, let me give you just a taste. I'll read a couple of paragraphs maybe from the first page of this book just to let you know what it sounds like. "Do not, I beg of you, my lord, say more," uttered Miss Milbourne in imploring accents, slightly averting her lovely countenance and clasping both hands at her bosom. Her companion, a tall young gentleman who had gone romantically down upon one knee before her chair, appeared put out by this faltered request. "Damn it! Dash it, Isabella!" he expostulated, correcting himself somewhat impatiently as the lady turned reproachful brown eyes upon him. "I haven't started." "Do not." "But I'm about to offer for you," said the Viscount with more than a touch of asperity. "I know," replied the lady. "It is useless. Say no more, my lord." The Viscount rose from his knee, much chagrined. "I must say, Isabella, I think you might let a fellow speak," he said crossly. "I would spare you pain, my lord." "I wish you will stop talking in that damned theatrical way," said the Viscount, "and don't keep calling me my lord as though you hadn't known me for all your life." So you can tell the dialogue is definitely a lot more flowery and a lot more formal than what modern readers are used to. And there is definitely a following of people who love Georgette Heyer books, who continue to read her books. I'm a member of a group on Facebook that are fans of Georgette Heyer. So I know that there are people out there who are still willing to read this kind of book. Hello, this is Later Me. This is Editing CC. I'm popping in here because the sound of my video cut out. So, unfortunately, the end of the video is not usable, which is a little frustrating because I thought today's video was a good one. But I just wanted to let you know that that's why there was a bit of an abrupt ending after I read to you from Friday's Child. Basically, what I would like to know is, are you a comfort reader? What are your favorite comfort reads? Please let me know. I would really love to know more about you and your reading habits. And hopefully you can hear this okay, because like I said, the sound of my video cut out. So I will end it with just this short outro, asking you about your favorite reads, your favorite comfort reads, and I'll be back again tomorrow. Hopefully the sound issue will be worked out. Thank you for joining me. I'm Cassidy Carson, and this is The Life of a Writer. Take care.